As the United States and Iran prepare to restart high-stakes negotiations, a financial confrontation of epic proportions is erupting between Washington and Beijing right now. Beijing has ordered all Chinese banks and entities not to comply with United States sanctions imposed on 5 major Chinese companies involved in Iranian oil transactions. The order from China's Ministry of Commerce issued on May the 2nd represents the first real-world activation of Beijing's blocking mechanism to counter American extraterritorial sanctions. This action is a direct response to sanctions announced by the United States Treasury Department on April the 24th, targeting the Chinese petrochemical giant Hengli and 4 other enterprises. These 5 Chinese companies were accused by Washington of participating in a sophisticated shadow network that facilitates the sale of Iranian oil despite existing American restrictions and sanctions. The United States also targeted 40 shipping companies and numerous vessels as part of this sweeping enforcement action aimed at dismantling the Iranian oil smuggling network. For years, Iran has utilized complex shadow fleets and intermediaries to export its oil to willing buyers, including China, while successfully evading Western-imposed economic sanctions. Reportedly, Chinese national oil majors avoided direct involvement in these deals, allowing smaller private petrochemical firms such as Hengli to handle the sensitive Iranian oil purchases. Practical strategy granted Beijing steady access to discounted Iranian crude supplies while carefully maintaining plausible deniability regarding violations of American and international sanctions regimes. Nevertheless, the United States Treasury Department decided to intensify pressure by blacklisting the firms and freezing their assets, including over $300 million in Bitcoin. China's forceful reply goes far beyond conventional countermeasures by activating its powerful legal tools that prohibit any domestic compliance with these controversial foreign sanction measures. The blocking statute requires affected parties to report sanctions impacts within 30 days and enables them to pursue legal claims for damages in Chinese courts. Explicitly, the Chinese government has forbidden all individuals and companies from acknowledging or implementing the American sanctions within the jurisdiction of the People's Republic of China. This landmark decision effectively neutralizes the secondary sanctions effects that typically compel global financial institutions to cut all ties with blacklisted parties around the world. Consequently, Chinese banks have received explicit instructions to maintain normal financial services and operations for the sanctioned entities in direct defiance of potential United States secondary retaliation. Such a bold stance places the United States in a difficult position, forcing a choice between retreating from its sanctions or launching a broader assault on Chinese finance. Any escalation would likely require the sanctioning of numerous major Chinese banks, potentially leading to their exclusion from the crucial SWIFT global payment system, as happened with Russia. The implications of this move extend far beyond these 5 firms by threatening to undermine decades of American success in enforcing unilateral sanctions globally through financial leverage. For decades, the United States has effectively wielded its financial might and dollar dominance to project power and influence far beyond its own national borders successfully. Yet Beijing's unprecedented activation of the blocking rules indicates a new era where China refuses to accept such extraterritorial overreach without mounting a significant pushback. Holding vast quantities of American government debt and dominating key global trade flows, China wields considerable counter-leverage in this emerging financial confrontation with Washington. President Trump and his administration now confront a critical test of their resolve amid this direct challenge to long-standing United States economic supremacy and authority. Backing down risks eroding the credibility of American sanctions policy, while pushing forward could ignite a full-scale financial war with potentially catastrophic global consequences. The world now watches anxiously to see how this high-stakes standoff between the 2 superpowers will unfold as the foundations of dollar hegemony face their sternest test yet. Yet what happened next sent shockwaves through global finance as Beijing activated its blocking rules for the very first time since their enactment 5 years ago. On May the 2nd, China's Ministry of Commerce explicitly forbade any person or entity from complying with or acknowledging those American sanctions on the 5 Chinese firms. This marks the initial deployment of a powerful legal weapon Beijing has kept in reserve precisely for moments when American overreach demands a decisive counterstrike. You see, for years, the United States has wielded its financial dominance like a club, enforcing sanctions extraterritorially across the planet without any real pushback. Remember how they crushed Carrie Lam, the Hong Kong chief executive, freezing her accounts and forcing even Chinese banks to deny her basic financial services. Or recall how the Russian delegation arrived in China, lugging suitcases full of cash, since SWIFT exclusion prevented normal banking for even hotel bills and shopping. But now China has drawn a firm red line, declaring that its banks must continue serving these sanctioned petrochemical giants no matter what Washington threatens. Imagine the incredible scene unfolding as China's major state-backed lenders receive explicit orders to ignore any secondary sanctions threats from Washington or face domestic penalties. This is not some minor diplomatic spat, but the opening salvo in what could become a full-blown financial war, capable of reshaping the entire global order. And here's the hypocrisy that should outrage every observer. The United States preaches free markets and rule of law while weaponizing its dollar system ruthlessly. For years, Washington has blacklisted entities around the world, expecting instant compliance from every bank on earth, including powerful institutions deep inside China itself, without hesitation. Now, those days of blind compliance are finally over, as Beijing's order forces Chinese banks to choose loyalty to the motherland over fear of American secondary sanctions retaliation. If the United States dares escalate by targeting those banks for secondary sanctions, it risks triggering a financial nuclear exchange that could cripple both economies overnight. Consider the sheer massive scale involved here, with the sanctioned firms holding accounts across China's top 9 global banks, all proudly listed in the Fortune 500 rankings. Sanctioning them all, and you effectively kick China out of the SWIFT system, just like Russia, but on a scale that would devastate global trade flows instantly. Yet Trump's own advisors seem utterly clueless about this new reality, having failed to grasp how China has spent years preparing precisely for such a confrontation. Remember the eye-opening transcript revelation showing Beijing's careful long-term strategy of using smaller private players like Hengli to handle sensitive Iranian oil deals while shielding the majors. And even those frozen Bitcoin assets reveal absolutely nothing new, since every single transaction remains fully traceable under constant American government surveillance, contrary to popular crypto myths. The truth is, Washington picked this fight at exactly the wrong time, when its own leverage has weakened dramatically against a prepared and resolute China. Hidden behind the sanctions is perhaps an attempt to project strength ahead of Iran talks, but it has instead exposed the limits of American financial power. You simply cannot enforce global hegemony when your target controls vast trade networks and holds trillions in your own debt, ready to strike back hard. One wrong move by Trump could see America. Now the question hanging over everything is whether Washington will double down on its failing strategy or quietly admit that its era of unchecked financial dominance is ending. Because the answer to that question will determine whether the dollar's decades-long reign as the unchallenged king of global finance survives this test or crumbles forever. Economically, the fallout would ripple across supply chains and trade routes, as China's control over half the world's commerce suddenly becomes a decisive battlefield advantage. Geopolitically, this bold Chinese move accelerates the shift toward a multipolar world where American unilateral sanctions lose their bite and alliances realign dramatically in response. Socially, the erosion of trust in American financial institutions could spread globally as countries question the reliability of dollar-based systems for their own economic security. Technologically, the myth of decentralized crypto as an escape from government control lies shattered, since every Bitcoin transaction remains fully visible to American state surveillance. Long-term, the cascading effects will hasten de-dollarization efforts around the world, pushing nations to adopt alternative payment systems like China's own cross-border platforms. For China, this victory offers a strategic opportunity to strengthen the yuan's international role and build a parallel financial architecture independent of Western dominance entirely. For the United States, the risks include a sudden loss of financial leverage that has sustained its global power projection for over 70 years now. Trump finds himself trapped in an impossible dilemma where backing down signals utter weakness while escalation risks unleashing economic Armageddon on his own nation first. If he chooses quiet admission, the era of unchecked American financial dominance will end, marking a historic turning point in global 21st century geopolitics. Yet, if Trump doubles down, the financial nuclear exchange could ignite a hot war equivalent in economic terms, with devastating consequences for every corner of the planet. Potential scenarios range from rapid de-dollarization accelerating BRICS expansion to a complete breakdown in international trade norms that reshapes global alliances for generations ahead. In one outcome, Washington retreats, and the American century of financial supremacy fades into history as the world embraces a new balance of economic power. In the other path, escalation leads to mutual economic destruction, where both superpowers suffer irreparable damage and smaller nations scramble for safety in the chaos. The strategic ramifications extend to technology as China gains momentum in developing independent digital currencies and payment networks free from American oversight and interference. Risks abound with global inflation spiking, supply shortages emerging, and innocent populations bearing the brunt of this superpower financial clash through higher costs everywhere. Opportunities arise for emerging markets to forge new partnerships and reduce dependency on the dollar system that has long favored American interests over fair play. This event reveals the fragility of dollar hegemony built on coercion rather than consent, and now facing its most serious challenge from a prepared adversary. As the dust settles, one thing becomes crystal clear. The era of unchallenged United States financial warfare is drawing to a dramatic and irreversible close. Xi Jinping has forced Trump's hand, exposing the limits of American power in ways that will echo through history books for decades to come. The world stands at a crossroads where the choice made today will dictate whether peace and prosperity or conflict and uncertainty define the coming years ahead. Predictions point toward a reluctant American retreat because the costs of full confrontation prove simply too high for any rational leader to accept willingly. Thus, the long arm of American jurisdiction over global finance has finally been broken by China's resolute stand, and nothing will ever be the same again. In the end, this financial showdown heralds a new multipolar era where power is shared, not seized, and the old order yields to an uncertain but inevitable future.